What's going on, boys? Thanks to our patrons and Fiverr customers, subscribe to our Patreon free for behind the scenes stuff, arm yourselves, life stuff. This is another video I don't have a special plan for. A few ideas to discuss and we'll see what happens. I've reached the level of tired over the last few days in which you can't even be angry at things. Remember Bill the Butcher? You got a murderous rage in you and I like it. It's life boiling up inside, it's good. I'm beginning to wonder if anger alone is more like a higher order driver. Because when anger goes away, or any of your other driving feelings go away, or they feel false when you try to engage in them, it's like that monarch thing, actually. He didn't need to try to hate Dr. Venture, the hatred poured out of him. What are you left with in situations like these? I think it's determination, and not in a focused, buckled down sort of way, but rather in an almost out-of-body experience way. The idea that you're here and that is your reason. Not in the my existence is enough sense, because that doesn't work, trying to convince yourself, but rather you recognize it and accept it as a reason not that you need to convince yourself of to feel good about, but rather as a reason that is beyond you, and it doesn't matter how you feel about it. That sort of affirming. Because it's not really affirming anything, it just is. Everything comes back to faith, and it's like the faith that you don't need to have faith in. It's weird feeling emptied out, but also encompassed by something undeniable. Psychopaths and memetic species. We're aware of all the different human species that have since gone extinct. I think we're at a point we need memetic species as well as genetic species. The same way genetic species live on the planet, memetic species live on the genetic species. People who are genetically the same but memetically different. And I don't just mean this, well, it's easy to think about typology here, but that's not what I'm talking about, because the memetic species I'm thinking of have all the different types within each of them. Maybe I'm talking about different soul species. The planet genetics memetics example and living on one another is useful here. Genetics fight over how material resources get used. I think memetics fight over the way genetics get used. And unlike with genetic Homo sapiens, there isn't one dominant memetic species yet. People assume we're all basically the same at our cores, and then culture is like a costume you wear, and that's not the case. Cultural differences, even when embedded in genetics you wouldn't typically associate with those cultures, create effectively different species. Our brains don't work the same way. Or we have the same brains, but we don't think the same. This is one of the reasons I'm obsessed with national identity. I think a dominant memetic species is beginning to rise and conquer in the United States. You don't realize how alike we think until you deal with other cultures directly. And the similarities within us are becoming clearer, as are the differences with not us. And I'm wondering if we're in a spot like genetic dogs are now. Different species, different baked-in traits, but you can interbreed them and achieve peak mutthood. The United States has been thoroughly mudded genetically. Maybe we are approaching mutterdom memetically as well. But this isn't a United States video. Here's something I was thinking about in relation to all this. I don't think intelligence on its own is either very useful or an indicator someone is going anywhere they would want to be. I think it's largely skill sets and these memetic orientations. As in, you take a dipshit elite child of the ruling memetic species and you train that elite child in the profession of ruling. I think that elite child will perform better as a ruler than a hypothetical genius child, but born into a non-ruling memetic orientation who either learned or was even trained in ruling. You hear about NPCs a lot. I think they do exist. And the backlash against the NPC idea is a tactic designed to slow you down or to make you second guess. Because that's another thing. Why are we in such a state as people? I think it's because memetic species, are not where they're supposed to be. They're being artificially gated. For whatever reason, there is this systematic resistance to memetic species, ending up where they're supposed to go. And one of the few things you can feel heartened about, maybe, is because it's artificial, it's not going to last. And maybe this is another reason Europe and pretty much everywhere else outside the New World is eternally behind. I think there is royalty, but they base their royalty on genetics and they justify it with divine right. Or maybe they don't anymore, but that's still the model they're using. That's still the way they look at it and feel about it. Which is why they're ass backwards. Well, everywhere else is ass backwards too. The United States and the New World is ass backwards, but we're evolving quickly. I think our ruling castes, or our caste system, is based on memetic species that, on the one hand, we are unaware of, by and large, or refusing to acknowledge, and then also, on the other hand, being prevented from seeing or doing anything about, for now. And ours, you could say it's justified by ability, but ability isn't a justification. It is. And I don't mean this in a meritocratic sense. Well, kind of, yes, but not in a socially rewarded way. And actually not even necessarily in a hierarchical way, but rather, eventually, resist it as much as you'd like, for whatever reason they might be resisting it. Things end up where they are supposed to end up. Because you look at it as a series of actions and intentions and all these other things, as if you exist and other people exist, when in reality it's all echoes, reverberations. We'll end up the only places we can end up, and our role in this, if we have a true role, is choosing, if we want to try to understand what's happening. I don't have any conclusions on this. All I have are patterns and the uncanny valley, which is the new common idea for the uncanny valley is the evolved ability to, or need to, identify non-human species when lots of human species were running around. Or non-Homo sapien, I mean. And I've been thinking about that too. It makes sense intuitively. I agree with it, but two things. Do you ever worry just because something makes intuitive sense to you, or even if it's quotes explained in a way that seems rational, but mainly is satisfying to the human perspective, is not what you think it is? And then, furthermore, the fear that the supernatural or unexplained is right in front of your face, but you don't recognize it as such because of socialization, because of programming, I guess, to view it as mundane, or not to recognize the majesty or mysterious, weird properties of things. It feels very much like we could be living in a prison of our minds that we created. Like a human species in some sci-fi universe or something, entering a super advanced weapons facility and saying, this is a house. And then you assign it in your mind house properties and you use it as a house to the point you can't think of it as anything except a house, but it's not a house. That's the way you're using it, and that's the way you're looking at it, but that's not what it is. Oh, and with the human memetic species side of this is another reason all the gender shit, including the non-binary shit, is important. It's not gender studies, it should be gender interrogation. And I was thinking about that too. Why do I have such a distaste for non-binary gender stuff? Well, it's because there is some essential components to the two dominating essential forces in the human species right now. We talked about this in the masculinity and femininity video. We act like these are, or this is, man and woman. I really don't think that's the case. Man and woman is... the differences are biological, and the translations into altered behavior are more minor than we think they are, but also uncomfortable with, because again, nobody likes the idea that they are controlled by something they can't control. And there are those, or these two primary dominating forces that channel themselves mostly through men and women, but that's getting fucky-wucky, and not in a bad way, because I think that right-hand path force is basically repulsive. It's designed to keep left-hand path people from achieving their ends, and it feels like it's being channeled to contribute to this artificial gating of people and upholding of the status quo. And non-binary people, in my view, are or non-binariness is supposed to be here to channel or examine potential different forces. And that's not at all what non-binariness gets used for. It's the most co-opted. And maybe that's intentional. An effort to make it seem so stinky, you choose not to touch it or to engage with it and learn what's there, because I do believe there's something there, but that's... I don't even know what to do with it. The primary focuses right now should be the left-hand path, right-hand path war, and this artificial gating of memetic species. I think it's inevitable it'll fall apart because it's artificial, but I'd like to see it fall apart now, so my opportunities are wider. But we're getting there. Oh, that was why we went on this tangent. The false gender we have now is the 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 house as the weapons facility thing to my eyes. It it's a thorough brainwashing that it both limits your potential and also limits your ability to see what's in front of you and to imagine how great you could be without these limitations. And it's not just like built literal material walls, these are walls in your mind. The tools you need to achieve greatness are right in front of you, but you can't use them because you are unable to recognize them for what they are. And examples, what am I talking about? It's creepy that high-level astrology seems to work. You can look at high-level astrology from a totally atheistic point of view, and you still see that it works, meaning if it's not woo-woo mystical shit, then it's something. Okay, are the planets exhibiting some totally scientific force that we don't recognize yet and probably won't because we're still calling the facility a house? I'm most critical of tarot because that's what I practice, but even when you discount the narrative building element of it, which makes it more acceptable to people, the fact the cards are designed to be or attach themselves to aspects of life everyone will have experienced, and even the cold reading stuff. I do a bit of cold reading, but I consider that part of the intuitive process. I consider there every single thing that goes into a tarot reading is supposed to be there, including the things that would make you otherwise feel or think you've screwed things up or you shouldn't be doing it. And the goal in tarot readings, at least for me, is not to give someone a right reading they want to hear. It is to give them exactly what I'm seeing and feeling, and then they do with it whatever they want to. And you have bad readings. I gave myself a bad reading. I misinterpreted my own spread. But I've been doing this for over a year now. There is something else to it. There is something about firing into the darkness and hitting a bell you didn't know was there and hearing it ring. I'm still not at a point I would recommend using it as a serious tool, basing your decisions on or around it or anything like that. But there is something to it. And that's part of why I wonder if there are more things with something to them that we don't recognize even could have something to them. And that makes me think about the space pictures. It was a mind break for me realizing these space photographs that we see are almost always filtered in some like infrared way or something like that to make them look the way they do. And if we, with our human eyes, looked at the things that were being photographed and look so beautiful in photographs, they would look like darkness. And it's curious because these marvelous space photos, I never really got anything out of them, and I didn't know why. I assumed it was because I would never see them personally, but knowing that from our eyes, everything that's out there is, for the most part, just darkness, that's both eerie on some underlying level and also actually inspiring. The way the photographs are supposed to make you feel. And I don't know why that is. Maybe it's just the fact underneath all of the lies we tell, there is a truth. Or even if you want to go, or rather, I should say, if you want to go in the direction we usually go, maybe there isn't a truth, but there is something other, definitely other, many others, than what we think is, or are told is. We might not have the faculties to understand what we're looking at, but we can look at it and recognize it as not a house. I think that'll be a key step in getting wherever we're going. Or this is another side to that. Maybe some people, or some sorts of people, need to look at it and see house. It's not house, but they need to see house. Whereas other casts of people, and I don't think that's one of the reasons why I bought into the no NPCs thing originally, or at least didn't like using it that way, was that makes it sound like there are NPCs and then there are player characters, and that's not the case. I think there's a spectrum of castes or memetic species, and maybe a bunch of them need house, but others, the myriad others, don't. And I'm sure there already exists training for these castes. We just need to get our hands on it, or figure out how to self-initiate. And I think you'll know when that's happening if you're getting there. Now, psychopaths are another part of this. I don't view them as equal to normal human beings or even other neurodivergent species. But they put me in a weird spot because people like that who are subhuman need advocates or advocacy more than anybody maybe. But for some reason, the advocacy brigade hates psychopaths. And that's a contradiction that's been bothering me for a long time. Do they not recognize psychopaths' subhuman status and their need for protections, or do they not care? That doesn't really matter. It's the question that it opens up. Why this contradiction? I think it speaks to everything we've been talking about so far. The looking at the facility and seeing the house. We are, for the most part, an outcome-focused species. We care about what is or what happens, and psychopaths usually lead to a bad is or a bad what happens. And because they usually cause negative outcomes, the empathy brigade judges them as if they were normal but malevolent people, and that's not what they are. They are subhuman. But what all this means is, one, we don't care about the reasoning behind things, even though we say we do. And then also, I think for most people there is an inability to access the reasoning behind things. And that's what I'm talking about in relation to memetic species. It's not just that large portions of people don't want to see the facility, it's also that they can't. The same way a baseline human can't breathe underwater, casts, large numbers of casts of memetic species can't access the reasoning behind things. And then they live in this extended brainwashing for some reason. Psychopaths are. I hate psychopaths. I don't like them. I wish they didn't exist. And it's creepy realizing, yes, there are a lot of them. A lot more than you'd think. You probably interact with them daily if you deal with the public. They're important because they trigger intense reactions that show brainwashing's hand in these other species of memetic species of people. The empathy brigade. You would completely expect them to champion psychopaths' cause in spite of everything, because they want to feel this way about themselves, the way they do with, like, the bugs. You remember or this is maybe a little more recent, but oh god, someone called them electric stirrups on beetles. People were empathizing with the beetle, and to be fair, that was the first thing I thought. I understand what they're saying. It's fucked up to do this to a being. I think we need to do it, but it is still fucked up and terrifying because it will be done to you one day. And that's one of the biggest tragedies of life, right? Is learning that you need to do away with the golden rule. It's a brilliant rule that if people followed, the world would be great, but it was invented because nobody will ever follow it, and it's there to make you hesitate and not progress and roll over and hope that when you're getting fucked, you're not fucking people will prevent you from being fucked in the future, and that's not what's going to happen. Anyway, they're empathizing with bugs while demanding you eat them. But they have an extreme negative reaction to a disabled hominid, caste of hominid, that probably does need help more than the stupid bugs do. They need to be protected from themselves, which is a deliciously awful thing to say, and they also need protection from people like the people who should be advocating for them but aren't, who want them removed from existence. It's a telling inconsistency is what it is. And the brainwashing prisons we exist in are tricky because even when you disagree with them, most of the time they will be consistent. That's what makes them effective prisons. But then you run into these moments, they are blatantly inconsistent, but people, and ongoing too, but then people act like there is no inconsistency. And that helps you realize what you're looking at is not a house, it's something else. And the other reason I bring up psychopaths is we were talking about memetic subspecies earlier, but we were talking about them in this essential spiritual way. You can see it, or we said it a while ago, you can see the effect, but not the cause, which is what we're guessing at here. This idea that there are different memetic species. But this opens you up to wondering what neurodivergence is within all this. Is this a location or an intersection at which genetics and memetics cross closer or clearer? Or is neurodivergence just another genetic resource memetics can tap, the same way we would differentiate iron and coal? The genes that need coal to thrive mine coal. Is it the case that memes that need, say, autism to thrive mine autism, or take root more in autism? And I'm beginning to classify within this schema neurodivergence, under the same umbrella, I categorize queerness. A vector that makes getting at the things you want to know easier. Queerness is a great vector for trying to know gender or, again, left hand, right hand path stuff. That's what they're there for. But going over to the neurodivergence side, taking groups of people like psychopaths, for instance, and seeing what memetic species or castes prefer to take root in them or to claim them, the same way a genetic thing would claim resources on the planet. Memetics claim certain genetics. And then by identifying those claims, getting a better idea of what the caste that has claimed them is. You look at a tribe of people, genetics, staking claims and gathering resources, and then seeing what they do with the resources they gather. Extrapolate, what do these memetic species do with the genes they harvest or claim or capture? And talking all this through, we are arriving at a couple odd things. And this is why I like making videos, because you talk through these things and you realize a few things. I was looking at this as if we were or are the memetics claiming the genetics, but the examples are working here, and if they are, then that's not the case. We are the things being claimed. We are as if we were iron or something, we are the resources being claimed. We are the genetics being claimed. So, you are not a memetic species, say, the same way iron isn't some genetics. Iron is possessed by the genetics the way you, the genetics, are possessed by a memetics. So yes, you do feel your caste or your memetic species, but you feel it because you are possessed by it, not because you are it. And then that opens up the question, what is the memetics? What is the thing doing the claiming? Are we presently in a facility and still assuming or viewing it as a house? This is what I'm talking about. Is the answer right in front of us, but we don't recognize it as an answer because we aren't programmed to, or our programming disallows us from understanding it? Same thing as difference between understanding something and knowing it. We're talking about all this. The obvious answer seems like there are other things, higher things, that use us, the genes, the same way we use the material, the resources, and we assume we are the memetics, when in reality we're only possessed by the memetics, and the influence we feel from them or assume we have over them is merely the consequence of being possessed by them. In other words, clutches of genetics are being possessed by individual things the same way items are possessed by individual humans or genetics, meaning right now we can understand the almost certainty we are looking at higher order beings every day because we're possessed by them. Yet, and we can understand that, yet we don't know it. Our programming, we're looking at it, and our programming prevents us from understanding what we're looking at. And that's unnerving to me. Knowing your purpose, your thoughts, your spiritual orientation, let's say, is not something you've chosen, but instead was chosen for you, and we knew that all the way back in the day. Those were the words we were using because I think that is the case, but we knew it even less then than we do now, but it hasn't changed because it's the case. All that's changing is the way we're looking at it or are able to see it. And it's unnerving that a defining aspect of your existence is something you are programmed not to be able to see. The extent to which your clothes understand or can comprehend your mind, your objects, object to genetics, is the same degree to which you can comprehend the mind of whatever is possessing you. Now, the hope, of course, is that that's not... Well, fuck me, dude. The hope, of course, is that that's not the case and you can understand up as you could be hopefully understood down, but you can understand down. You have objects. That's another thing we talked about a long time ago, is objects have... There's something about objects. It's probably sentience, but in a way we don't get. I go into this to make the point there is actually precedent where I didn't realize there was some. There is an actual as below to this theoretical as above. But it's also freaky because under which circumstances have your objects directly spoken to you or known you, or your intentions? Your objects experience you through effect to the same degree we probably understand our claiming higher beings through effect. We know them primarily through what they do to or with us. We take an effect and then we try, if we're supposed to try, to trace the steps back to an idea of what that cause might have been. And that opens up a concern. What if there are these castes? What if there is this selection happening, but the selection is happening on a level we don't understand? In other words, there are criteria for selections and why they happen, criteria for these subspecies or castes, but we aren't privy to them. Once again, the only or best way we can really guess is examining the peculiar genetic to guess at what it means for a certain memetic to have claimed most of them. But always, as always, not all of them. I think we'll cut it here. I'm tired, and we're swimming in circles, and they're good circles, but I don't think we're getting anywhere in this video. Like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you haven't.